Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Politics with Laura May Lindo. I am your host, Laura May, and here we are on land held down, cared for, loved, and stewarded by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We are on the Haldeman Tract, and I wanted to offer you this reflection as we are thinking about what we can learn from Indigenous activism and solidarity movements, and doing so right here in the midst of Black History Month and in the midst of a provincial election. And so I have been spending a lot of time actually reflecting on how individuals and communities that are not typically centered in politics navigate things like these election times, when people are knocking on our doors and asking for our vote, and they are wanting to have Indigenous communities come out and support them, but aren't necessarily ready to walk an authentic path for Indigenous reconciliation and for Black folks for liberation. And it is for that reason that I decided I would use February to actually stay focused on what it is that we need for liberation. And I want to just say how grateful I am to Indigenous community members who have taught us that in the midst of any of the changes that are happening in the colonial systems around us, that they matter, their voices matter, and that centering their needs is literally necessary. And so today I actually have a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Christopher Taylor, who is going to be joining me to have a conversation about the Black agenda. And so we will have one quick break, and then we will be right back to get started.
Your Region This Week takes you behind the headlines on issues and events shaping our community. Tune in for new episodes on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. and Fridays at 6 p.m.
Unbelievable! You just never see that. Scores! What a shot! Scores! The OHL on Rogers TV.
Hey, Chef D here. Join me Saturdays at 4:30 for At Home with Chef D, season number 10. Thanks so much for that. Hey, we're going to go back old school. We're going to join Julia Child and Graham Kerr and some of their great recipes and share some of their passion with you. At Home with Chef D, Saturdays at 4:30. Won't you join me?
Cooking with Chef D.
When I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, I was deteriorating in front of everybody.
All my life I lived with sickle cell. I went through a tragic crisis that put me in a coma for 3 weeks. While I was in there, I received a lot of blood to put me in a healthier state.
I was given the plasma then through IVIG. Even though that happened so long ago, it still has a massive impact on me today.
Thanks to donors, I can live another life.
Because of you, I will be seeing my grandchild.
As Ontario heads to the polls, Rogers TV brings you coverage of the candidates running to be your Queen's Park representative. Tune in for the local campaign as this election's most important local issues are addressed.
I really want to hear from my candidates this time. There's so much on the line.
And on election night, watch the local results. Coverage focused on the numbers from your local ridings. Make Rogers TV your election destination.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I am so excited to have you here, Dr. Christopher Taylor. How you doing?
I'm blessed. Thank you very much. It's a nice morning this morning. No complaints at all.
It is a good morning. And so I want to start our conversation. I'm going to take us a step back. So I'm celebrating Black History Month, and that's very, very important. And a lot of people sort of are unaware of the kind of advocacy that's happened with Black community members in post-secondary settings. And so I'm wondering if you, before I dive into the sort of political questions, if you could spend a little bit of time just telling us about this Black collective that you're a co-founder of.
So first of all, I appreciate asking that question because it feels It feels such a long time ago, 2020. I think some folks may or may not remember May 25th, 2020. I deliberately don't say the particular name in that space. So if you don't know, please Google why I say May 25th, 2020. And there was this awakening, as folks like to say. I have a different term for that. I published on this. I don't call it an awakening, but I'll move on from that. And what happened in that space, comes from in my own experience in my own career. I was at the University of Waterloo teaching, loving what I do. And the institution approached me saying, hey, and this literally was, say everything happened on the weekend, it was a Monday, get an email, call and whatnot saying, hey, would you like to be the confronting anti-Black racism or anti-racism advisor? Basically, everybody who was Black got that question asked to them. If they had any kind of competency in this space. And they asked me, and I said, no, because I mean, from my own career, I've been in this space and I said, you know what, this is not a space I want to come back into. So I have mentors at University of Waterloo, some fantastic people that really have continued to guide me. And I asked them, I said, should I do this? And they said, no, don't do it. But from those conversations, and it was first of all, one person in one corner, another person in another corner. And then eventually I was like, wait a minute, I'm talking to, at the time, about 4 or 5 people, Black professors. And I said, hey, how about we just set up a meeting and all speak together? And from that, we had weekly meetings every Friday, conversations, really putting together not requests, but demands from the institution. And then one day, I'll never forget this. One day, we're in a meeting and I said, wait, what should we call ourselves? And then it became the Black Faculty Collective. Fast forward, we really got staff involved as well, Black staff and Black students, particularly grad students. And so now we morphed into the Black Collective.
Beautiful. And I want to go back to something you said. You mentioned that you've published on that day, about that day. Can you tell me the name of the article?
So it's Cause for Change, or Lessons for Change, Black Liberation. And I can send links for this as well. It published this in, I think, 2021 or 2022. And the term that I use is the Negro Apocalypse. And the reason why I call it the Negro Apocalypse, it's, first of all, we've been in this space before. Right? Everybody was in panic mode about BLM. I'm like, in the past 5 years, this is BLM part 2. If we talk about 2016, if we talk about 2012. In Ontario, if we're even thinking 1992, the Young State Rebellion, Rodney King in the US. We've been in this space before. And so for me, from looking at that particular moment where we were, I use that term apocalypse because it wasn't an awakening. It was essentially a fear of Black people mobilizing and organizing and not asking for change, but asserting and demanding for our humanity. And what we see now 5 years later, it's been this fundamental backlash or blacklash of this fear of us mobilizing and organizing. So I use that N-word term there, not the other N-word.
Not the other N-word.
Not the other N-word, that N-word.
Want to be clear.
Just being clear, folks. Just being clear, because if we look at, and folks, for example, Donald Moore, who was one of the founders of the Negro Citizenship Association and Committee, so NCC and NCA in the mid to early 20th century in Canada, he even had a conversation, say, don't call me Black. Don't call me Black. Call me that other word, the Negro. And if you look at the history of it, there's been a shift in how Black people have been called. Enslaved people, the other N-word, colored people, people of color. Black became a political term, African Canadian, African American in the US. And so for me, that Negro term fundamentally represents a colonized being. If we talk about colonial people, we talk about the Negroes. So let's come back to, well, are we pushing for our liberation? Yes, but the society still sees us as these subjugated colonial beings to sit down in the corner and shut up.
Well, and so for those that are watching, one of the things I'll do is make sure that there's a link to the article that Chris was talking about. I'm also going to um, make sure that there's some links to a couple articles and books about BLM-TO and about Bad C, the Black Action Defense Committee, because I feel like we forget that.
Yes.
And we forget whose shoulders we're standing on. And that's part of why I wanted to speak to you. So we've spoken a little bit about the Black Faculty Collective, now the Black Collective, and what a lot of people may not know. I think many people will know you're a historian. If you don't, now you know. And the other thing that people don't necessarily know is that you worked in government. So you've been, like I often say, inside the belly of the beast. And in particular, having worked in the Anti-Racism Directorate, where you would be able to then see like how we are perceived from the political machine, how we are perceived in the world, how we would like to be perceived. And so one of the questions that that I had for you was around this I'm calling it a Black agenda. And I don't know what else to call it, but I'm wondering if you would be able to share what you think from inside that political machine that agenda was. Like, how was it seen from outside and inside?
So I appreciate that question, Dr. Lindo. And so just a quick overview. So before I came, a lot of people see me as the Black academic, literally Black academic.
Yep.
Black comma academic and then Black academic.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank there. But before this, I had an entire career in the Ontario Public Service. So I first started in the Ministry of Labor, which I tell my students all the time, if you have an opportunity, even if you want to disrupt and destroy systems, work in a system, even particularly if you're Waterloo for a co-op term.
Yeah.
For 6 months, just to, as you know, Laura May, as you mentioned, just learn that system. So started in the Ministry of Labor, then I moved into the Ministry of the Attorney General. That's where you really start to understand and learn particular spaces. Then I had a fantastic opportunity to work with Kimberly Murray in the Indigenous Justice Division. And when it comes to reconciliation, when it comes to restorative and transformative justice, being in that space really, when we talk about being in the belly of the beast, really shifted my understanding of reconciliation, Indigenous rights, and sovereignty. Then again, fantastic opportunity moving into cabinet office with the Anti-Racism Directorate. And then I moved into corrections. So the joke amongst a lot of folks is, wait a minute, you worked in all the quote unquote hard ministries.
Yeah.
But for me, those were the ministries, when we talk about a Black agenda, that were most impacted or most continue to be impacted by government initiatives. I mean, if you look at the Ministry of Attorney General, they create the laws.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
In every single ministry. So any space you're in, environment, Ministry of Labor, it's coming through the Ministry of the Attorney General. And so I joke with folks all the time. You say, well, you know, policing. But I say, well, what about the crowns?
Yep.
You know, the people who are actually putting you in jail. And so coming back to the Black agenda and particularly being in the Anti-Racism Directorate, that's where we created. And can I name drop folks here?
You can name drop.
So I will always tip my hat to Dr. Remy Warner, Caspar Hall, Dr. Kwatu Kenti. These are folks, you know, my colleague, you know, Nicole Bernhard, like Valerian. These are folks that all Black for the record. And I used to joke, in our little pod, we used to have 4 Black people, 3 of us with dreads. And I looked around one day, I was like, man, this will never happen again. And it never did. Right? But being in that space and having people from different walks of life and having people from different perspectives, you know, from different countries, from back home countries and host countries, and just seeing and really understand how can we consolidate our different perspectives to create one solidified Black agenda.
Yeah.
And through the Anti-Racism Directorate, that's where it's created the it's funny because officially it's still called the ABR, the Anti-Black Racism Strategy. And if you think about that for a second, you're like, shouldn't it be the Confronting Anti-Black Racism
We forgot a word.
Strategy? I mean, that's the City of Toronto, Caber. Shout out to Anthony Morgan. In that. I always laugh in that particular space. So for me, it's really looking there, and what was created was coming in this space of focusing on child welfare, education, and justice. Yeah. And really looking at those three core areas to formulate this Black agenda. The core areas, if you think about child welfare, look, we're in 2024, 2025, and there's double digits of missing Black boys, and it's barely a line in CV24. So child welfare, education, the push-out rate is still there. Again, not dropout rate, push-out rate. And justice. So for us, it was really looking at those particular areas that Black youth, Black young people, our future, were facing the most, I can't even call it just discrimination, but barriers and exclusion. If we fix those with a targeted universalism approach, meaning if we take and support Black communities and change the system, that means it's going to support everyone for a better education system. Talk about child welfare. We cannot talk about Indigenous kids. Right? Justice system, geez. For everyone. Right. So that was how we took that Black agenda. And it's very unfortunate because I was doing some work, and by 2024, if we looked at the quote unquote ABR strategy, the plan was to align with the International Decade for People of African Descent. The plan was that all these disparities would be reduced.
And here we are. This is actually a really good place for us to take a quick break, because I do remember when I was in office, the entire time that I was there, that's 5 years, and there was no mention of the decade for people of African descent. And I am going to make sure that that I have a link in the resources for this episode to those details from the United Nations, because when you've got a province like ours doing the work that it claimed to be doing that doesn't acknowledge the decade in any tangible way, that says we're collecting data, but then doesn't actually do the work to address the disparities. Like, why are we collecting the data? And so I'm gonna take a pause. Under normal circumstances, for those that have been watching, you know what happens. We would eat bread, but I had to call in from home because I am a little under the weather. And so this time we just take a break, grab a coffee, grab a drink of water or something, and we will be right back.
Hey, what's up? We're Chris and Cam, host of What's Buzzin', right here on Rogers TV.
We talk about local trends, we interview local guests, and we overall just have a lot of fun.
8 p.m. Wednesday nights on Rogers TV.
Stay tuned.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
Kitchener's perfect music mix is on Chime 96.7. So every song is someone's favorite song. On Chime 96.7.
Speed, grace, accuracy, excellence.
David cuts in, waits, tucks it home. A virtuoso.
Pure fire on ice. You know I'm here for it.
After a night out with your friends, there's always options for getting home safely. You could call your BFF, your mom or dad, whoever you can count on for a safe ride home. You could call your favorite cab company or 1-888 taxi guy. Or you could use the Arrival Live smartphone app to help you choose your ride. Be it a friend, transit, or taxi, Getting home safely is app easy. Now available for iOS and Android devices. Visit arrivealive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive. Drive sober.
Have you ever thought about just how much politics you speak about just in your own kitchen or in your living room? Or how many important ideas are shared or solutions to some of the world's biggest problems? Well, you're in luck, because I'm inviting some of my friends to come and speak to me about everyday politics, and I'm bringing my living room to you. So join me on Wednesday evenings from 6 until 7 for Everyday Politics with Laura May Lindo. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. So we left off talking about some of your experiences inside the system, and that the development of what I'm calling this Black agenda and what you folks were trying to put together for us from government. But here we are, like, we're having this conversation and we have a provincial election underway. We know that there's going to be a federal election coming soon after that. And I'm wondering if you could spend a little bit of time talking to us about what you think Black communities need to know about the system of politics in order for us to forward or further this agenda.
Fantastic question. And for me, particularly being in the provincial government and learning from folks. So full disclosure, I also worked at the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit for the City of Toronto. I've done work for the City of Mississauga. And through folks like Anania, who is the founder of the CABR unit, so Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, I think the first step is Black folks need to understand the different levels of government.
Yeah.
And I always tell Black folks, and that's a conversation we used to have in the Anti-Racism Directorate, is step one is to build competency of how governments, plural, work.
Yes.
And Laura May, you worked in, so you understand through and through. But I'm not even going to just say Black folks. I would argue the majority of people, if I was to say, hey, write down a list of your daily activities and write down what government controls what.
Mm-hmm.
So we're speaking of education. Okay. Provincial. All right. What about garbage? Is it a city or a region? Oh, KW, is it, Waterloo region, or is it Kitchener? Okay. Well, so what about immigration?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the federal. And now, particularly in this particular election, you have a provincial leader or who's conflating two levels of government of what he can and can't do. And that runs particular problems for Black folk to say, well, I'm not going to vote because I voted for so-and-so and it didn't change my kid in K to 12.
Yeah.
So I always say, okay, well, what is important to you? Okay, so who's your MP? Who's your MPP? Who's your school trustee? Who's your city councilor? And are you asking them for what you need, as opposed to saying, well, you know what, our prime minister didn't do X, Y, Z. But I mean, the prime minister doesn't, well, at the core level, doesn't control you going to the hospital. Yes, we could talk about transfer payments, but I think, Laura May, you can talk way more about that better than that from me. But we fundamentally don't understand. I'm saying we generally now don't understand how our government system works. I guarantee you some Black folk can talk about electoral colleges more than they can talk about the shifts in how we have our parliamentary representation, our seats, and the changing boundaries and whatnot. So for me, and that's one thing that I learned from working in the system, to say, okay, how does the Ministry of the Attorney General work? What do police actually do?
And who determines what the boundaries are of what they do? I want to pause you there for a second, because I have like 5,000 things I just want to say to the public. So the first thing is, a lot of people assume that I understood government when my name went on that ballot, and I did not. And I tell people that because you're always learning, and until you're inside, you don't actually know. What I knew was what they taught me in grade 10 civics, which was a half of a half credit. I knew there was a government. I knew that there was a cartoon that talked about a bill becoming a law. That's all I knew, right? And then when I got in, I had to figure it out. And figuring it out was a process in and of itself, because there were presumed things that one would know. And then the tradition of the space showed you that there was another layer of things happening. The other thing I wanted to go back to is the conflating of different levels of government, because as much as we see that happening in the provincial space, I remember I was the critic for colleges and universities, and I remember discussions of the federal government making a plan for post-secondary. And I was like, folks, we are confusing everybody. Like, I just finished putting out flyers and leaflets saying who isn't responsible for post-secondary. And the same thing happened with older adults. There was a master plan that was supposed to be a national strategy to address the needs of older adults. And it is dire. But if we don't understand how that trickle down does happen, then those grand plans just become plans, talk with little action. And so if you go back to your time at the Directorate, for instance, or even with corrections, because both of them would have a similar, sorry, that's so sad. I just put them together. But here we are. The sort of national strategies that we have when we think about Black people in Canadian space, right? I talk about, we've had some guests on that have spoken about the need to update the history curriculum, for instance, in K-12, talk about what's happened in Nova Scotia, et cetera, right? So those grand plans, what does that look like then when it trickles down into a provincial strategy? And how do we, I don't know if it's a balance of both, like having that national presence as Black folks who have been here since like 1600s, to the local presence for Black folks, let's say in Waterloo region, who are just struggling to get by?
Ooh, fantastic question. And I think the first step is to really understand that there are some pan-Black Canadian common denominator issues that we all face. There is no province, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, there's no province or territory in Canada that is Atlanta. There's no Black Mecca. Some people might argue Ajax, which is most Black people per capita. That's a different conversation. Some folks might argue Halifax, Birchtown, those folks. But there is no place that there's a Black Mecca that we can point to and say, yes, this is where Black people are thriving as a collective. So for me, it's yes, we have, we should have a broad Black Canadian strategy. And to your point, Laura May, how do we tailor it to particular provinces? How do we tailor it to Quebec, which is hostile, let's be honest, to non-Francophone, non-Catholic whites? Like, it's hostile.
And it has a history of Black activism that, again, we don't always look at.
Shout out to The Porter.
Yes.
Shout out to The Porter. Check it out.
Yes.
It's on Netflix. It's on CBC Gem for free. And if we take these lessons from Africville, if we take these lessons from Montreal, if we take these lessons from BC, if we take these lessons from Alberta, John Ware, who was the first and most famous Black cowboy in Alberta. And people are shocked when they say, like, wait, what? If we take all of these lessons and say, wait a minute, this is what y'all did over here in BC. This is what y'all did in Cape Breton, right? You got a lot of West Indians in Cape Breton. This is what y'all did. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
We just take all these lessons learned, say what worked, say what didn't, put it together, tailor it to particular restrictions that we have in our provincial and our municipal spaces, and make it work. Because we can. At the end of the day, life is pretty simple. We as Black folks, and I always say to folks all the time, the reason for our discrimination and racism is because of our dehumanization through enslavement and colonization. So fundamentally, our liberation is our humanization, is to find our humanity and liberation as humans. I'm pretty sure whether you're living, you know what I mean, in St. John's, Newfoundland, or in Kitchener-Waterloo, that's what you want for yourself and for your kids.
Yeah. Yep. Honestly. And so it's funny because I've often said, so two things that I often say to people that you've reiterated. So now those that are watching know it was not just me. Understanding the system that you're operating in so that you can better construct your liberation movements is critical.
Yep.
And recognizing that some of these asks have happened before. So part of the system challenging our humanity has come from trying to make us feel like it just happened. Like today was the first day that there was a hate crime against Black folks, or today was the first day that Black people were pushed out of school. And up until this moment, we were thriving in education in the province. But there's like historical documents. Out of curiosity, when you were at the Anti-Racism Directorate, I don't know if people know this. Sorry, I'm going to stick a pin in my question. I'll come back to it. But I couldn't find the physical location of the Anti-Racism Directorate when I was elected. And I was the anti-racism critic, and I was trying to get my briefing, which I found out everybody is entitled to. And the minister at the time, who's currently our Minister of Health, or she was the Minister of Health, now there's an election, so there's a pause, Sylvia Jones, was not giving me the documents. And so she wouldn't give me and she wouldn't set up the briefing. So one day I brought my little team and we went on an adventure until we found like the door with the sign on it. Anyway, all of that to say, when you were working in that capacity, because there was openness, I think, from the province to build something to address anti-Blackness in the province. And there was it's like the stars aligning at that moment. How did you folks actually handle the number of reports that had already come to government? Because it wasn't a matter of building something new. It was a matter of recognizing that long history of advocacy. Like, how did you folks work through that?
No, if we were in person, this is, you know, those moments you jump on the table. You're like,
it's that moment.
This is one of those.
Yeah.
For one, we've had in the Anti-Racism Directorate, not just people with degrees, and we had, I never worked with so many PhDs in my life, but people who had been in the game for decades.
Yeah.
And so they were not only bringing in their own lived expertise and lived experience, they were bringing decades, generations of studies, reports. You know, one thing we always came back to was the Stephen Lewis report in 92.
Yep.
Everything has been done. And so it was, you know, some people like, oh, so how did you pick, you know, education, child welfare, and justice? I was like, you know, people have been talking about this. Ray McMurtry has been talking about this forever. We want to talk about education. We could talk about Marianne Shadd Carey. We can go back to the 1800s, folks. Like, this is nothing new. But to your point, Laura May, it becomes this, well, you know what, George Floyd happened. This is the first time, you know, police brutality. It's like, first of all, you know what happened right here in Ottawa, right? And so it was just taking all that information and unfortunately, like you said, having that moment that worlds collided, that now you have another platform to present that information in a different medium. That people are like, oh, okay, let's just change it. I'm going to read this now. But it's this fallacy that, and I call it the trick of white supremacy, that it makes you forget. It makes you have this memory of a goldfish that you have to start over every 5 years, every 10 years. When in reality, all these books behind me, people have been writing about this
forever.
Because
it's always been part of a person's desire to be seen as human. Like, it is back to what you said. There's simplicity in what it is that we're asking for. But I think that part of what I can do and part of what I think you do is act as a reminder to folks that we've been here before. So on the one hand, that can leave us feeling a little bit perhaps depressed or hopeless because we're repeating this. But there's a part of me, maybe it's the eternal optimist, that thinks that there's lessons that we can learn if we reflect back. And so perhaps what we need, and we're going to take another little break, but I think in that break, maybe we take a deep breath and we reflect on that, like the lessons that are learned and what are some of those successes that we can carry with us and take that pause. So we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back with the amazing Dr. Taylor.
On Rogers TV.
Your Region This Week takes you behind the headlines on issues and events shaping our community. Tune in for new episodes on Mondays at 7:30 p.m. and Fridays at 6 p.m.
As Ontario heads to the polls, Rogers TV brings you coverage of the candidates running to be your Queen's Park representative. Tune in for the local campaign as this election's most important local issues are addressed.
I really want to hear from my candidates this time. There's so much on the line.
And on election night, watch the local results. Coverage focused on the numbers from your local ridings. Make Rogers TV your election destination.
Hey, we're Chris and Cam. We are the hosts of What's Buzzin' right here on Rogers TV. We are that show that chats all things trending, interviewing local guests, and we embarrass ourselves a little bit too. That happens.
Yeah, honestly, we're that talk show you definitely want to check out. We're super fun. We have on local guests and things that you want to check out in the community. You can check out on What's Buzzin'.
Yeah, it starts here.
Starts
We're gonna have
here.
a lot of fun, and that happens on Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Today, I helped a parent feed their family by connecting them to a food program.
Today, I helped someone connect with mental health supports.
Today, I helped a couple struggling to pay their bills access financial aid.
Every day, 211 navigators connect Canadians to critical government and community programs and services.
211. Help starts here.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so we've spoken about some of the advocacy that you've done sort of outside with Black communities. We've talked about inside the system and trying to make sort of change in that space. And my last question for you is around a Pan-African Black agenda. What would that look like? But more importantly, I want folks that are watching this to have ideas of what they can be asking of the people who are knocking on their doors. Like, we are currently in an election. And so there are opportunities for individuals of all stripes to ask all of the people that are vying for their vote questions about what they are going to do, actual actions that they can do to support Black communities. And so I'm curious on your end, like, what does that agenda look like and what can we be asking of these folks that want our vote?
Fantastic question. So we'll start with the agenda, and we don't even need to work in hypotheticals right now.
Mm-hmm.
There is the Global African Congress that really focuses around reparations, particularly in Canada. So the CARICOM reparations movement, CARICOM, we're talking about Caribbean Community Nation States. Mm-hmm. And this is being led particularly out of Barbados. And there's a 10-point plan. And that's built on, formulated around, I shouldn't say built on, the foundations of the Black Panther Party's 1960s 10-point plan. And a lot of that focuses around education, surprise, surprise. A lot of focus is on, focusing and uplifting the Black self.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when people talk about reparations, they think about monetary reparations. Yeah. No, we need to think about investing money into Black communities.
Yeah, because that's investment in our future.
Thank you. And so Dr. Chevy, who's from York and now out in Dalhousie, has been pushing this on a global scale of really pushing a Canadian-focused reparations plan. So for me, it's already done. It's using these platforms to let people know there's folks advocating for this outside. There's folks advocating for this outside Canada in a Pan-African space, but also within Canada. So definitely, I know we can share the resources after, check that out. And so for me, if you're asking people, somebody's knocking on your door, potential MPP knocks on your door and say, hey, I'm Christopher Taylor. I want your vote. I'd ask them, so I have a son. I have a Black son who's 14 years old. I've been following the news on social media about these missing Black boys.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So that ties into child welfare.
Mm-hmm.
That ties into policing, like how police respond to these issues. That also ties into education. What are we doing in schools? That falls into community support. Yes, we have national, and we talk about sport, that calls into national sporting bodies, but also falls into Ontario sporting bodies. When we talk about education, extracurriculars, what are we doing after school for these kids?
Yep.
That would be my pointed question. What are you doing, or what will you do to help literally bring these boys home?
It's really interesting because I think it's important for folks to have concrete examples of what they want their potential representative to know is important to them, and to tie that to these broader movements so that they know that they're being monitored and watched from all around. Like, that's what accountability is, right? And so I think that's a perfect example of a way that we can do that when it comes to supporting Black communities. But the other thing that I just want to say for the record is that it's not just Black communities that should be asking these questions. And it's for that reason that I'm going to make sure that I have the links to the 10-point plan, both from the Panthers and from CARICOM, so that we've got ideas of the kinds of change. People would be surprised at how, I want to say, basic some of those points are. Like breakfast clubs. Breakfast. Like, let's talk about that. What are some of the important things on the 10 points that we're asking for, Christopher Taylor, Dr. Taylor?
Laura May, I'm so glad you came. Jeez, man, I feel like this is like some Zoom, symbiosis going on here. Federal government pushed out to Grand Affair a breakfast program. There's a federal government pushed that out. And all these breakfast programs we hear about in Toronto schools or in Kitchener schools, or Mississauga schools, it was the Panthers who first came up with this idea, because somebody had sat down and said, you know what? If kids are hungry, they won't be able to learn.
Yep.
I got a PhD in history. I ain't no neuroscientist. I ain't got all that letters with sticks and circles and all that stuff.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure if you don't have nutrients, your brain's not going to develop and you can't
concentrate. Things ain't working.
So, Laura May, to your point, right? And this is what it comes back to. If we, again, coming back to this idea, and this is something I fundamentally learned from the anti-racism directorate, if we take a targeted universalism approach, and the Black Panther Party is a prime example, Black kids need food to do well in school or to be educated, however you want to define that. People are like, hey, you know what? Maybe Ukrainian kids need that too.
Yep.
Maybe Indian kids need that too.
Yep.
Maybe Pakistani kids need that too. Now we have a national program that supports that because it was focused on Black people. So when we focus on Black folks, again, taking this targeted universalism approach, whether your MPP is like, hey, what are you doing for Black kids? Human trafficking in Ontario is a real deal. It's not just Black kids. So if we're going to take this issue of these Black boys, it's going to help that child who's fifth generation Canadian who was trafficked. Irregardless and irrespective of their race. So these are the things, and to your point, Laura May, if we can focus on Black folk, it is not going to take away from other communities. It's actually going to help all of our communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always say, again, so we started off and we said it's important to understand the system that you're operating in if you want to make change. And if you want to know what to ask, you need to understand that system. Well, if you want to solve a problem, you also need to understand the extent of the problem. And you can't pretend that the problem is only impacting this little percentage of the population. And how it's impacting other people actually gives us clues. So if you take something like trafficking, if we only think that it's young white girls that are trafficked, then we're missing a whole slew of other people, and we're allowing that whole trafficking system to grow. So then you ignore Indigenous women and Two-Spirit Indigenous folks. You ignore the Black boys that are disappearing. We ignore all. So for those, I'm getting excited, so I make no sentences. But listen, I am going to try and find a link. There were some town halls that were done for this epidemic of missing Black youth. And so I'll see if I can link to some of the articles that were written about that. I don't know if any of the town halls were streamed somewhere, so that folks can start to connect these dots. When we're talking about addressing the epidemic of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit folks, we're actually talking about keeping young people safe. We're talking about keeping people safe.
Yes.
And so if we start to rethink our systems to ensure that we keep Indigenous communities safe, we are all safe, right? It's a lovely and simple thing. And so I hope that we can come up with, let's try and think of another example, like a concrete example that is something that people can ask at the doors. So we've talked a bit about missing boys, Black boys. That's something that you can literally ask at the doors. What's another good example of something that folks can ask at the doors when somebody is coming to knock and ask for their vote?
Long-term care.
Bring it.
Long-term care. We joke all the time, Black don't crack, but there's something called weathering, right? And so for folks who don't know weathering, it's the constant discrimination, constant weathering. Constant discrimination, constant racism is killing our physiological age. So you might be 55 on your birth certificate, but because of racism, it's 65.
Yeah.
But for me, when I talk about long-term care, everyone ages. Full stop, period. We could put long-term care and healthcare in general.
Yeah.
There's a doctor shortage, not just for white people, not just for Black people, it's for everyone.
All the people.
All the people.
All the people.
And last time I checked, to get more doctors, you need people to be succeeding from kindergarten to grade 12.
Yeah.
And an undergraduate. So if you're underfunding post-secondary education and underfunding K-12 education, where are you going to get doctors from?
Yep.
And ultimately, yes, Black folk are disproportionately affected, but everyone is. So my question, I would start from the end to say, so, my mother or grandmother or grandfather is X years old. What are we doing to support him or her? Like, what are we going to do inside our homes? What are we going to do? We talk about, we need to build more homes, but are we talking about more accessible homes? Not just accessible homes for people with disabilities, but people who are aging.
Yeah.
What are we doing? And so these are the questions I would ask and say, so what is your plan? And from that small question, you've tied in long-term care, for an aging population. You've tied in healthcare for you and for your kids and for your neighbors and for your whomever else. You've tied in kindergarten to grade 12. You've tied in post-secondary. You've tied in so many different, just asking, how are you going to support my aging grand X person. Is it?
Yeah, it's really, really important, and I always find it fascinating. People are, I think, because of the way the system is set up, they make such a big difference between those that are elected versus those that are on the ground. And so people get nervous when it comes to, oh, I can ask a question, but they can't get into that job without your vote. And so you hold a lot of power. But what I also think it's important for people to understand is that the actions that they take once in government, whether they're official opposition, sitting as an independent, or a government member, is dictated by what they believe matters on the ground. And so if we don't ask these questions and if we don't get specific, like I want to know what the action plan is to actually walk the truth and reconciliation path. Like, I want to know what you're going to do. I actually want to know what your investment in the Anti-Racism Directorate will look like. Because I can tell you that when I was there, there were moments before a cut was supposed to be happening. And then there were some things, and then I may have said some things, and then there were some investments. But the point is, if we don't ask for it and we don't bring light to this matters to us, then those are the first things to be cut. So Dr. Taylor, this is my favorite part of the show. I ask everybody this because we need to speak into being what it is that we want to see in the world. So if you could snap your fingers and make one system change, what would that be?
It might seem funny coming from a professor and coming from someone whose family is full of educators. I would decolonize our education system. And when I say decolonize, I mean it in the fundamental self and stance that before there were schools, before there were universities, people learned how to survive. People had the ability to cure illnesses, deliver babies, build bridges, right? The griots of West Africa, the historians, tell stories, pass down information, traditions. And look how long society survived if we didn't have a commodified education industrial complex that everyone's got to get a degree, pass through, go to school. Why? Does it make us a better society? That we have more YouTube influencers, that we got AI all over the place? Like, does it make us a better society? So for me, and again, it's funny when coming from a professor, I'm like, just decolonize this. And when I say decolonize, I say go back to a pre-colonial, I gotta be clear on this, a pre-colonial way of educating ourselves. Like Bob Marley said, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. And a portion of mental slavery was the fact of getting this colonial way of thinking. And how's that helped us?
That's fantastic. That's fantastic, because then we're going right back to where we started, where you're just trying to be kind to each other. You're trying to, you're operating from a place of care and love and desire for other people's well-being. There's a simplicity in it. And I want to thank you for spending time with me this morning and reminding everybody about the simplicity of the change that we seek, because it really is. We could just be the change. We could just do that.
That's it. There's no dissertation or book. It's like we could just be the change.
We could just be the change.
That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, folks. We will be right back after this break.
Hello, welcome to Lions TV Bingo. An announcement, we are now on Mondays. Yes, every Monday from now on. Lions TV Bingo is going to be here on Rogers. We'll see you this Monday.
Hey guys, Steph here from The Cruise TV, the show where we talk about the people and stories behind the coolest cars on the road. Join us on Sundays at 8 p.m.
Hey folks, it's me, Giovanni Petiti, the host of Not Tonight. It's the new late night talk show right here on Rogers TV. We got fabulous guests, a lot of laughs, It's just like the Jimmy Kimmel Show. If you order the Jimmy Kimmel Show on Wish. So join me Sunday at 10 o'clock right here on Rogers TV. Nice.
This is a perfectly healthy child. What's unhealthy are birth alerts, a racist practice that may stop this Indigenous mother from going home with her newborn. Become an ally. Rise above racism in healthcare.
This is TGL presented by SoFi. 24 of the best players in the world, no, the universe, pitted against each other 3 versus 3. In a first-of-its-kind arena. More Tiger, more Rory, more everybody. 6 teams, Atlanta, Boston, LA, New York, the Bay, and Jupiter. Not that Jupiter. What else? We had a shot clock, mic'd up players, a ref, playoffs, 15 holes, overtime, timeouts. Did we mention the green moves? High tech, higher stakes, and you get to watch it all, baby. Keep up. It's golf.
Welcome back, folks. Was that not a brilliant conversation? Thank you again to Dr. Christopher Taylor for joining us and enlightening us. I just want folks to know that I will make sure that the resources that we spoke about are available to all of you. There will be more, but some of them will include a link to the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit in Toronto. You can actually see the history of how they came to be, and it's a really important step in centering Black folks in a political system. So I think that's really important. Dr. Taylor has said that he's going to send me some links to some of the folks that he spoke about, some of the people that historically have done this kind of work that we want to make sure that we center and learn from as we move forward. I'm also going to make sure that I connect to the 10-point plans that Dr. Taylor was talking about, because you can literally take any of those points from the 10-point plans that have historically talked about what is needed in Black communities and other communities of color, and ask people that are knocking on your door what they are going to do, how they are going to use their position of privilege to make good on those demands. And so if you do not already, please do not forget to find me on Insta. You can follow me at everydaypolitics_official. I make sure to put a link to each of the interviews and remind you about the conversations that we're about to have. And if everything goes according to plan, next week I have something very special for everybody. So enjoy yourselves. Make sure to check out the resources, and we will see you next time.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
This is a brain in urgent need of mental health care. But because 3 out of every 4 Indigenous people experience racism in healthcare, she may not get the help she needs. Become an ally. Rise above racism in healthcare.
Sundays for Pairs is a service that we believe will help you discover more of God's promises and purpose for your life. A reminder that God is for you. Courtesy of Pairs Community Church. Join us every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. on Rogers TV to be encouraged and pointed towards hope.
Hey everybody, it's Sean Ferfaro reminding you to tune in every Friday night at 6:30 for This Week in Rangers Nation. I'm going to have exclusive highlights and interviews with your Rangers players. I'm going to have Rangers alum